I'd now like to invite Mr. Royston Briganza, CEO, Grameen Capital India, to give his insights on NBFCs driving sustainable growth. Mr. Briganza, can we have you on stage, please? Can we have a round of applause for Mr. Royston Briganza?
Sorry, I was following the football match between South Korea and Uruguay, so it's an interesting stage we are at in the world of football, correct? So many uncertainties. We've seen the Germany result, and then we are seeing the result of Argentina. But I guess we should be used to uncertainties by now. 3 days ago, I was having breakfast with the RBI governor, and he mentioned that the time that we are at is likely to be called a triple black swan event. I don't know whether we've ever seen something like that before. Pretty unprecedented that we've had the COVID pandemic, on the back of that, the Ukraine war, and probably the worst ever financial recession that we are looking at. And so in this triple black swan event, in a context of NBFCs and tech, I think, is there any hidden opportunity that there is for us? And I want to touch upon that in the next 15 minutes. I know it's a painful 15 minutes after hearing speakers all throughout the day and with your awards coming up and then hopefully some dinner. So this is a bad spot in a way to talk about it. But I think it would be interesting for us to see the context in which we do the work that we are in. I come from Grameen, and we had someone from Grameen Credit Access who talked about their work in microfinance. So we belong to part of the Grameen family that actually is the Nobel Peace Prize winner. So Grameen Bank and Professor Yunus in 2006 won the Nobel Peace Prize. And I've started Grameen Impact in India, Grameen Capital in 2007. So 2006, we launched Grameen Capital, and we began to work in microfinance. One of the things we realized that there were 400 million people less than $2 a day, and this enormous task of being able to reach the unreached and bank the unbanked. I can see Sanjay here from iFinance, and many others have been doing incredible work in that space in terms of financial inclusion. And we realized that one of the biggest challenges was access to capital, which is why we created Grameen Capital in 2007 to see how do we bring the bridge between funds and between the people who need funding. And that really was the world's first social investment bank that we created. We worked with NGOs, helping them to transition to for-profit, and then for-profit to NBFCs, and then NBFCs, 9 out of them into small finance banks, and Bandhan into a mainstream bank. So in that journey, I also chaired the Indian Microfinance Network, Sadhan. And when I finished my term, I'm still on the board, but not as chair, we've reached 62 million clients, effectively 62 million households, because each of these is a poor woman at the bottom of the economic pyramid. And so in that journey, 2 or 3 learnings that struck me, which I wanted to share over the next 12 minutes, 29 seconds, as the timer reminds me. I want to talk about first the whole access to debt. One of the big things in microfinance that we've been talking about and often talk about is, the equity investors that came in. But what really moved the needle was access to debt funding. And that happened in 2 or 3 fashions. One was the RBI creating microfinance as part of priority sector lending. The other was, opening up a new category called MFI NBFC, and then SEBI creating a new entity called the Social Venture Capital Fund. So the importance of putting all of these pieces together is something that we cannot underscore enough. And so as we create products, and I've been here on and off through the day listening into the panels, and it's exciting to see the customer centricity. It's interesting to see the innovations in technology. But I think that's what annoyed me in a sense, because that's too harsh a word, and I'm so used to being politically incorrect that I have to check myself. But I think we're still trying to build a better NBFC. And I don't know whether that's the right way to approach this. If Grameen had started 30 years ago trying to build a better bank, we would have not reached 30 million in Bangladesh or, a Nobel Peace Prize. It approached it completely differently. It said what is really needed at the bottom of the pyramid. And so fine-tuning the existing banking framework would not work. It needed something completely different. It needed to build a better mousetrap, as they say. And therefore, it was something that actually turned banking upside down. If a bank needed collateral, MFIs, microfinance or microcredit didn't need collateral. If it needed previous banking history or introductions or bank track record, it didn't. So it needed a new bank. It needed a new banking regulation, which was created in Bangladesh. And so I think what we are seeing today, I don't believe that the banks of today are going to exist as they do 5 years from now. Banks, and so there's going to be tremendous disruption. And we are seeing that. I mean, many of you during the panels today and in your jobs are working on that level of disruption. And so what is that new that's going to come out? I mean, the RBI governor was talking about an experiment that is being done currently in Tamil Nadu, where the farmer on his phone is going to apply for a loan that's going to go and ping a server which is actually geotagged his land parcel, which is then reading off the data to see what's the quality of the soil, what's the produce over the last few years, what's the type of productivity expected, ping another system which is going to say what is his household borrowing, where is he borrowing currently from, and that's going to then calculate the gap in terms of his funding requirement and then credit his account. All of this real time. So that is what is the type of design that's going to come in. The new central bank, the digital currency got launched on the 1st of this month. So the pace of innovation that we are seeing is quite staggering. And therefore, what are the opportunities that the world is throwing up for us? It's often that we end up sort of burying our heads in the sand with our day-to-day jobs, but the opportunity that is facing us is tremendous. In September this year at the UN General Assembly, and I addressed the UN General Assembly just before COVID on funding the SDG gap. That gap is $30 trillion globally. That gap for India probably is about $6 to $7 trillion. Where is that global funding coming from? 3 months ago, Antonio Guterres, who was the Secretary General, actually sort of did this impassioned plea at the General Assembly saying we need to save the SDGs. Because of COVID, and even if you read Bill Gates' report, he says 24 years of development have been eroded in 24 months of COVID. So you can imagine the staggering impact on the bottom of the pyramid, the staggering impact in the life of the poor, that one black swan has happened. And if we are in a triple black swan event, then we can be talking about all the good things that our companies are doing, but we also need to reflect upon what's really the new world order that we're going to be operating in. And so how do we unlock the power of the funding that is necessary for the Sustainable Development Goals? How does that come into the NBFC that I'm running? How do I serve clients if they fall into Goal 2 on food security, or Goal 3 in healthcare, or Goal 4 in education, or Goal 5 in women's empowerment, or Goal 6 in water and sanitation, or Goal 7 in clean energy, or Goal 8 in livelihoods? I can go on and show off because I know all of these by heart. But that's not the intent. The intent is to say that with India becoming the G20 president in the next 12 months, there's a lot of global attention that's going to be focused on India. The world's eyes, in a sense, are going to be looking at India and see what is India going to bring to the table to be able to solve for a global problem. And therefore, I want to challenge you in this room to start thinking beyond. Of course, you should be doing what's best for your organization, and that's what we are paid for. But what are we able to solve for that is solving for global challenges? What's going to be solving for global problems? And therefore, in this situation that we are in, where we are looking at these, triple black swan, gloom and doom, darkness, I want to place before you the 4 letters of the word hope. because the word hope, I think, is what the world is looking for now. And so, in the next few minutes that I have, let's look at those four letters and see what areas or what systems or what processes do we need to put in place. So the first word is, a holistic approach, the H of the hope. And I think we're hearing a lot of that in the panels today. What do we need to do at a holistic level to be able to bring in the right policy changes? We talked about microfinance. We needed an RBI to make a priority sector lending. We needed people like Sanjay and others to start MFIs and new categories of MSME financing. So we needed entrepreneurs. We needed a special type of rating agency. We needed a different type of credit bureau. So the whole ecosystem needs to be built. If we want to look at financing a $7 trillion SDG gap for India, imagine we're talking about building a $5 trillion economy or a $10 trillion economy. $7 trillion is needed at the bottom of the pyramid. We could build something that will not be sturdy if we do not support the enterprises or the individuals at the bottom of the pyramid. So as a country, we need to focus parallelly on building the large organizations, but also the base of the economic pyramid. So what is that holistic approach that we need to put into play? What are the regulatory paradigms that we are doing? I know the Monetary Authority in Singapore has created a regulatory sandbox. There's a blockchain model being evaluated there. South Africa has created a blockchain for solar, where poor families who have a solar unit on the top of their household can get into the distributed ledger, ping the system when they draw from the grid, ping the system when they contribute to the grid, and so it nets it off. The World Food Program for Syrian refugees is using the blockchain to track food packets. So the type of use of blockchain or the type of use of new technology is cutting across different areas. I mean, we think that, sitting in this room, there are clearly a lot of bright people and walking through the exhibition, so much of innovation technology, but it's being put to use at the bottom of the economic pyramid. And that is something that's extremely exciting to see work being done in the World Food Program, work being done for Syrian refugees, work being done in the solar populations in Africa. So the ability for us to create a holistic ecosystem approach. So that is the H. The O is a new trend that we are seeing globally, which is called outcome-based finance. I don't know if you've heard about it, but globally, a lot of funding is now moving into outcome-based finance. Traditionally, it was always, I'm paying you and you do some good. So I'll give you money and you build a hospital. I'll give you money and you put up a school. I'll give you money and you build a solar farm. Today, the world is moving to, you show me health outcomes and then I will pay you. You show me learning outcomes and then I will pay you. And so the ability to sell outcomes, the ability to monetize impact is something that's becoming quite interesting. And now with the creation of the social stock exchange in India, and I've been part of the drafting committee on some of that work, it's interesting to see how India is leading the world in some real innovation. And can we bring in new pools of capital? Can we democratize funding access based on these interesting models? And therefore, we talked about was a holistic approach. O was in terms of outcome-based financing. The P is really about partnerships. And a lot of what you've discussed right from the morning has been about how do we partner, what are the co-lending opportunities, how do we partner with banks. And the new normal is not going to be us doing everything alone. We've been sitting with heads of NBFCs over the last week, budget recommendations to the finance minister. We were with Deputy Finance Minister Karad yesterday. And so there's a lot of thought being put into what is this new collaborative world that's coming in. How can everyone focus on what they are good at and support one another rather than everyone building everything from scratch? And so what are the partnerships that we are called to build? And especially in the NBFC world and partnering with financial institutions, what is that new world order going to look like? And finally, the letter E, which is everyone is included. Part of the world's SDG charter, Agenda 2030, is called Leaving No One Behind. How do we make sure that everyone is part of that progress? Everyone is part of the developmental agenda. Everyone is part of being in that progress that the world needs. And so I want to leave you with just those 4 letters to be able to build those into our business plans, build those into our work ethic, because clearly the moment for India is now. Irrespective of whom you talk to, there are challenges in the US. The folks in London, I was there last month, pretty worried. I was speaking at The Hague before that. The Eurozone is worried with winter coming up and the food and the fuel crisis. And India is that bright spot. I mean, it was said in so many words at the IFC World Bank event in the US a few weeks ago. So how do we capitalize on that India is the bright spot? What are the pieces that we need to put in place? I think that letter of HOPE, I don't know if you're awake listening to me, but maybe I'll just repeat it once more. Creating a holistic ecosystem. O is to look at outcomes. What is the result of our work? Start measuring those outcomes. Creating partnerships to be able to grow. And finally, including everyone in that growth. I don't know whether I'm supposed to take questions, but I'll leave that to you. But thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? We can probably have time for one question in case we have. Okay, we have one question.
So see, my question is, we all are talking about, black swan, somebody is calling it white swan, right, for India. There are a lot of terminologies are given, but what we do as a lending company, right, for us what matters is NPA. Whenever any such events are going to happen, NPA for every company is going to shoot up, right? So the only solution is to slow down or try to find the right segment, right? There are 2 solutions.
No, there are 3.
Right. Third, I would like to understand. So my perspective, I want to, hear your point of view that, we talk about black swan,
Yeah.
right? We want, as you said, inclusiveness, and there are a lot of terms which looks good on paper, but from the practicality, every company deals with NPA, right? They have
absolutely right. And I get the question. So sorry, I'm interrupting you because I know where you're heading. I keep joking that I keep coming down the corporate ladder while people like you move up. So corporate bank, so Citibank for a decade, HSBC is a corporate bank, investment bank, mid-market, SME, micro. So my journey is exactly the opposite of yours. But I do understand, and while we talk about process and onboarding and evaluating, finally it's about collections. The whole business is about lending and risk management. So probably in addition to the 2 you mentioned, the third option could be de-risking. Is there any other way to de-risk? And which is why I talked about the SDGs. CDC has set aside $2 billion for what they call the just transition. If you're working on the 17 SDGs, then you are part of that just transition. Whether it's DFC in the US, whether it is FMO in the Netherlands, whether it is Proparco in France, whether it is DEG in Germany, governments have set aside tons of money to focus on the SDGs, which is why I'm telling you about the O. If you are measuring the outcomes of what you're doing, and if you're able to tell them that I'm looking at a segment, so you don't have to change your segment, but if your segment fits into what the world wants to develop, then use their money to de-risk. So you don't need to slow down. If someone's ready to underwrite your risk, then to that extent it takes care of your NPA problem. So how do you creatively structure models? So I've launched a company called Grameen Impact, which is creating SDG impact bonds. So we will lend to NBFCs, we will lend to school companies, we will lend to plastic recyclers, we will lend to solar companies, and we will try and find them a de-risker from one of these government pots of money so that our book is protected by them and money is going to those entities. So the ability for us to create new structures creatively, I think, is where the opportunity lies.
Thank you, sir. And I'd request Dr. Ravi Gupta, CEO and Editor-in-Chief of the Banking and Finance Post magazine, to please come here and felicitate Mr. Royston Braganza, CEO, Grameen Capital, India. Thank you, sir. It was a very insightful talk that you gave. Can we have a round of applause, please, for Mr. Royston Braganza?